Good morning. So for today and then Friday, tomorrow, I won't be here. There's a bar mitzvah downstairs that I have to attend. So I won't be at the class tomorrow. But for today and for Friday, the plan is to learn what we have in front of us, which is a talk transcribed into an essay by the Rebbe, in which the Rebbe analyzes and delves deeply and sheds new insight onto the last lines of the tractate, which we learned yesterday. So we looked at them yesterday and we put down some of the Rebbe's questions. And essentially they are as follows, just quickly recap. The Mishnah stated in its list of characters and personality traits, qualities that were exemplified by certain sages and how they passed or they stopped once they passed. Rabbi Gibel noted a good point and emailed me a good point in the language, which perhaps as we go along, maybe not today, but on Friday, Rebbe will have something to say about what Rabbi Gibel commented, which is essentially that the language in the Gemara is batel. Not that it ended, but batel. And batel means nullified. Batel, batel, levatel. Like batel means it's a halachic designation when something is nullified and something else rendered inconsequential. So a little drop of milk falls into a big pot of soup. If the ratio is 60 to 1, then the milk didn't disappear. It's just batel. It's no longer significant considering the dilution, right? So that's the language here, is batel, which seems to imply that the humility or the qualities are not gone. They've just been diluted, which is a good point. And I think that's correct. And perhaps we'll see a little bit more about that. Maybe not today, but tomorrow, on Friday, when Rebbe compares the humility of Rabbi Yehuda with the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu versus the humility of Rabbi Yosef.
Right, we were saying that yesterday, that each generation
That's correct.
down the line,
that's right.
there's less of the
That's what Rabbi Gimel was speaking to,
right.
which Laron brought up. So that will come up, God willing, on Friday. So essentially, the Mishnah said a number of qualities that were batel, that were nullified or ceased with the passing of sages who exemplified those. The last of which is Rebbe. Rebbe, the compiler of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he passed, batla nava v'yireschet. Humility and fear of sin were now batel, now nullified, now no longer. The Gemara commented, Rav Yosef said, don't include humility on the list of things that are no longer, because I'm humble. And Rav Nachman said, don't include fear of sin on the things that are no longer, because I'm here. So each of them are talking about their own qualities and stating that they exemplify that which the Mishnah said is no longer. Rav Yosef speaking of himself, I'm humble. Rav Nachman speaking of himself and saying, I have fear of sin. So we noted in many of his questions. Firstly, it seems like, first of all, why didn't they each comment on each other? Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman live at the same time. So Rav Nachman should say, I know my friend Rav Yosef, and he's humble, so don't put humility on the list of things that are longer. And Rav Yosef, knowing his friend Rav Nachman, should say, don't include in the list fear of sin as something which is no longer, because my friend Rav Nachman is here. Why are they each commenting on themselves? Which seems to imply that there's a dispute here. In Rav Nachman's view, there is no more humility, but there is still fear of sin because he's here. And in Rav Yosef's view, there is no longer fear of sin, but there is humility because I'm here. Right? Now, before
Couldn't you come to the same conclusion, even if they
spoke of each other?
Right.
Okay, if they spoke of each other, then you could argue that in their humility, they're not talking about themselves. They're each talking about their friends, but really they both agree with each other. But because they're talking about themselves, it seems like they're disagreeing with the other person saying about themselves.
Yeah.
Right? If they're speaking about the other guy, okay, so in their humility, they're not speaking about themselves.
It's not disagreement as to the other tree.
It's correct. Because they're speaking about themselves and not the other. Anyway, Rebbe goes through a whole back and forth before the point that we're getting to. And Rebbe suggests one explanation. Rebbe rejects that. Rebbe introduces other places in the Talmud where both Rav Nachman and Rav Yosef speak about their own character, or their characters are spoken of, and builds a kind of profile. But we're going to focus in the parts of the talk where Rebbe actually addresses the lines in our Gemara without getting sidetracked by some of the other things. And I should also note that throughout the talk, in the footnotes, Rebbe introduces other commentaries or cites to other commentaries that have alternative explanations and explains why he either incorporates them into his own interpretation or why he rejects them. And we're not going to be going through that either, but they're there. So if you wanted to, someone watching wanted to get further elaboration, you can have a look at Likkutei Sichos, Rebbe's magnum opus of collection of essays, volume 13, the talk on the Parsha Baaloscha, the second essay on Parsha Baaloscha. And the reason why it's in Parsha Baaloscha is because Baaloscha is where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu is the most humble of all people. In that context, Rebbe discusses the humility of our Gemara.
This was a talk that Rebbe gave?
It's all, Rebbe did not write much. Rebbe spoke prolifically, and it was transcribed. So most of the talks that Rebbe delivered are transcribed, unedited, just raw transcription, either directly word for word verbatim in Yiddish, or translated into Hebrew, but transcript nonetheless. There are selected talks that the editors submitted to the Rebbe to edit, and the Rebbe edited them and turned them into essays. So he didn't write it, but he edited it.
You mentioned footnotes.
So the footnotes are usually come in the editing later, or sometimes in the Rebbe's talk, they would go on a tangent, and the tangent we put into a footnote.
So the transcriber will consider that as a footnote.
That's correct. And the transcriber will also, the Rebbe gave guidelines to the transcribers as to how to put together the way he wants an essay to be presented, and then he would edit it 2-3 times, and it was published. No, that's fine. So it's good to understand how that works. That's why it's called Likkutei Sichos. Likkutei Sichos means selected talks. They selected some of his talks for transcription and editing to be presented in essay form, and they're organized by the parshas of the week. So it goes Beishis Mois Vayikra, Amid B'Dvarim, and then back again Beishis Mois. So each 5 volumes will go through all of Torah with 2 or 3 essays on each parsha. So in this case, for example, it's an essay on the Gemara, but it's launched from the parsha because the parsha describes Moshe Rabbeinu as humble, right? Which is important actually because we have 3 levels of humility. We have Moshe Rabbeinu. Torah describes the most humble of all men. This is something that was mentioned yesterday. Number 2, we have Rebbe of the Mishnah who the Mishnah says that when he passed, there's no more humility. And then you have Rav Yosef who says, well, hold on a second, I'm still humble. So we're going to have to kind of understand what these 3 levels of humility are also. And that will come clear, God willing, on Friday. Okay, so on the bottom right there, Dalet. So after the Rebbe makes the point that there must be a dispute between Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman, in that Rav Yosef says there is no more fear of sin, but there is humility because I'm here. And Rav Nachman says there is no more humility, but there is fear of sin because I'm here. The Rebbe then launches into his main explanation, beginning with the famous question which we discussed yesterday. Namely, the Yuvin Zebehektim will understand all of this by first prefacing Hakushya Hayudua, the well-known question, the Maimer in the statement of Rabbi Yosef. Quote, Loitisnei Anava, don't include on the list of things that are no longer humility. Dika no, because I'm here. Hey, I'm humble. So don't put humility on the list of things that are no longer. So there's a well-known question. Zeh Gufa, this itself, Rabbi Yosef Mishtabeach, that Rabbi Yosef praises himself, the Midas Anava, with the attribute of humility, Ukipirdush Rashi, and as Rashi comments on the Gemara, Shani Anvasan, I am humble. That itself, is exactly the opposite of humility. To declare one's own humility is the opposite of humility. The famous question. In the footnote, there besides to Marsha's explanation, but we're leaving that aside. Throughout the footnotes, never does that. Okay, this is the famous question, which was like the obvious reaction when we learned the Gemara yesterday. Wait, what? Did you say I'm humble? Like, what are you saying? So says the Rebbe. And in this, we're going to get to the Hasidic understanding of what humility is, and then soon we'll get to the Hasidic understanding of what fear of sin is. What truly does it mean to be humble, and what truly does it mean to be fear of sin? So Habir Bazeh, the explanation is top left. Now the Rebbe is quoting from Hasidic sources, specifically, I believe, from the Mittler Rebbe, from the second Chabad Rebbe. Quote, Ein Pirush Anav. The meaning of humility is not Kamosha Olam Sarvim, as many people think, Shepirush, that they explain it, Huloshin Shiflis, it is to be downtrodden. Humble does not mean to be downtrodden. Ki Shiflus, because someone who's downtrodden, Transport is the wrong translation of
Like a
shiftless.
doormat kind of feeling.
It has a negative connotation. Shiftless means to be like self-effacing, like where a person thinks lowly of themselves.
Like low self-esteem, sort of.
That again gives it a negative connotation. Shiftless could have a positive connotation, where a person is self-effacing, but it isn't appropriate necessarily, because as we're learning, the proper thing to be is an anav, is humble. And we'll understand in a moment why. So he says, kishiflus, because thinking low of oneself, humasha yedeya umaker erkoi vishiflusai, to be lowly of oneself is because once someone knows and recognizes his value, and he knows his lowliness, shushafal anafin, anashim, that he's a low person amongst people, that he's a low quality. Behind this means to say, continues the Rebbe, mishu be'emes mushlam amailas, someone who is indeed lacking qualities. That's someone who's of self-effacing, because he sees himself honestly and says, look, I'm not as talented or as exceptional as other people, and therefore I understand that my position is of a lower grade. Or the Rebbe adds in parentheses, he says, this is very important, or perhaps he does have virtues, but they're not known to him. He doesn't realize the value he has. So either indeed he has no values, which of course isn't really the case. Everybody has value. But let's just say the person understands, look, I'm not as smart as other people. Okay, so there are people that are smarter than me. Nothing wrong with that. I just understand. And in the room, when I walk into a room, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. That's fine. Or I'm not the best at basketball. Whatever the quality is in question, I understand that I'm just not as good as others. That's shuffle. And that's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily a negative thing to be self-effacing. It's being honest. Right? I'm honest. I'm not going to inject my opinion in a conversation when I understand that my knowledge of that subject is lacking. Or in a worse scenario, where I do have certain qualities, I just don't even realize it. Right? So that would be a negative connotation to shiftless, where the person has qualities, but is not honest enough to recognize that he has them, or lacks the self-esteem to acknowledge them. Okay, so that's shiftless. That's to be self-effacing. Ulam bat ha'anav, the humble one, the emesu, in truth, is, the motion is bar le'il, as mentioned above. We didn't learn that, but earlier, the midas ha'nava shayotzel Moshe, well, above, earlier in this essay, when we discussed the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, we said that humility is ish hamaylas, is someone who has virtues. And he knows exactly what his value is. He knows he's the smartest guy in the room. He knows he's the best at basketball. He knows whatever the quality is we're talking about. He knows he's the best musician, whatever it is. He acknowledges that. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that his level of prophecy far surpassed everybody and anybody. He knew he brought the Torah down to the people. He knew he led the people out of Egypt. He knew the miracles God performed through him. He knew all of that. And he knew that he was responsible for containing, understanding, and transmitting all of Torah. It is no small feat. And he certainly was aware of that. He's an honest man. But along with this, he does not at all show off any of this at all. Or mizgah means to be haughty. He's not arrogant about his virtues. And he does not at all give himself credit, even though he's aware of his qualities. And the reason he can avoid taking credit, even though he knows his value, commotion is bar lil sif aleph, as explained earlier in part 1, in chapter 1 of the essay. Because he knows that the powers, the potentials, and the talents, hanailim, the great ones, shaloi of him, kulam, all of them, have been granted him by God. So I know exactly how smart I am, but I'm not taking any credit for my intelligence. God granted me the intelligence. I earned the intelligence? No, I did not. Hashem granted it to me. So Moshe Rabbeinu knows that he's the greatest prophet. But I earned that? I didn't earn that. Hashem chose me. It's his choice. Furthermore, and he can make the following calculation within himself. He makes the following consideration, the following reckoning. And now back quoting from that source in Chassidus. Moshe Rabbeinu, and likewise anyone who with honest humility can say, had these powers and capacities been granted to another, that person would be at the same level I am. Top of the next page. The Efsher, and perhaps the Acher, the other one, had he been granted these capacities that I have been granted, he may have maximized and utilized those virtues even more. So if someone else been granted my intelligence, maybe they do a better job. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, if someone else was chosen to be the prophet, maybe they would do a better job than me. It's all founded on this idea that humility is not a contradiction to self-confidence. Someone who knows that he's the smartest person and says, oh, no, I'm not Talmud Chacham. It's first of all, it's false humility. And you see, unfortunately, we see this. Someone asks a question of someone who learns. And the person doesn't want to answer because he doesn't want anybody to know that he knows how to learn. Why are you robbing the other guy a piece of information? Because you want to be humble? First of all, it's false humility. And in fact, it's actually arrogant. It's arrogance, because now you're going to walk away, pat yourself on the back, because, hey, look, I avoided someone knowing how smart I am. Well, the other guy suffers without the piece of information that you could have given him. It's not humble. It's lying. And it's arrogant. True humility is to answer the question, provide the other person with the knowledge you've been granted, but you do so with a certain humility, knowing that it's not, I know the information, I achieved this intelligence, this is a gift God granted me, and I dare not waste the talents God has granted me. Someone else been given the talent, it's very likely they would have done a better job than me. Right? It's very difficult for someone to express this humility in words per se, but in the way someone talks, you can hear it. You can hear it in the way someone speaks, or the way someone performs an art, whether it's singing or gymnastics or whatever the talent is a person's expressing, the way in which it's expressed, the way in which the person carries himself, you can see a certain humility. Is he doing this because he thinks he's the best, or is he doing this because it's his humble duty to maximize every talent God has granted him? Not because he earned them, because Hashem granted them. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu can be simultaneously the most confident leader. It wasn't like Moshe Rabbeinu was a meek leader. He fought when he had to. Koydach, and the spies, whenever he had to put his foot down, he put his foot down. And not just at the people, but to Hashem. When Hashem says, I'm wiping the people, I'm starting again from you, Moshe says, no. So he's got lots of confidence. And yet he's the same one who says, why don't you send someone else? Because you're choosing me. Choose someone else. But if you're granting me the position, I'm going to do it to the max I possibly can, with the full confidence. And yet that confidence does not undermine his humility. Because to begin with, he understands that everything he has is because Hashem granted it. So it's a whole new understanding of humility, not as a contradiction to confidence. They actually go hand in hand. My confidence comes from the fact that Hashem granted me these talents, and my humility comes from the fact that Hashem granted me these talents. Both my confidence and my humility come from the exact same place. My acknowledgement that everything I have is a gift. And because it's a gift, I better use it the way Hashem, the grantor of that gift, wants me to use it. And I do so with the full humility, because it's not me. I didn't earn this. And this is how Moshe Rabbeinu can balance, and can not just balance, but can, like, in the same breath, be the most confident leader and the most humble leader. Very unique quality. So this is Chassidus' explanation of what humility is. Now comes the Rebbe, and this is mind-blowing. Top right on the second page, which would be page 34. Likewise, we can say, but Mailas Hanova Atzma, Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef's humility itself is one such quality that he himself treated with the same humility. He treated his humility with humility, namely, Sheyada Mailas Anvas Nusay. He knew the virtue of his own humility, but nonetheless, he did not give himself any credit for his humility. He looked at humility as another quality Hashem granted him. So he can humbly say, look, I'm humble. I earned this humility. Hashem granted me this position as being humble. Isn't that amazing? Even his humility, he carries with humility. But Adarabba, and not only does he carry it with Not only does he not take credit, but Chashav, Rabbi Yosef himself could think to himself, that had someone else been granted the same abilities and talents that he has been, Efsher, it's possible, that person would reach a level of humility that's beyond the humility he has. He looked at his humility itself as another quality Hashem granted. And therefore, if someone else is granted that same humility, maybe they would surpass me. It's a mind-blowing approach to humility. Nothing about me is because I did anything. Even the very fact that I have the ability to humbly accept the gift Hashem gave me is itself a gift from Hashem. It's unbelievable. It's beautiful. And only someone with the honesty of a sage from the Gemara can say this. Only someone that kind of honesty, who can truly honestly say, I didn't earn my humility either. Even the ability to recognize the gifts that I have is itself a gift, right? It's like the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which says, Chaviv Adam, well, there's different statements there. Well, let's just do the one about Yidden. Chavivin Yisrael shenikar banam l'makom, precious are Jews that they have been called children of God, and chiba yiseir nadas lehem, an even greater measure of preciousness, the fact that they've been informed that they are God's children. Meaning, there's one thing to have the quality. The other thing is to be aware that you have the quality and to be aware that it's a gift. That itself is a gift. My grandfather. Whenever I learned that Mishnah, I think of him. Because he used to say a person has to have two sets of mazel. You have to have mazel, you have to have good fortune. And you have to have mazel to know you have mazel. You have to have good fortune to notice and recognize that you have good fortune. And the same thing is true that it was telling us with the humility itself. This capacity to be aware of the fact that everything I have is a gift, that itself is a gift of Hashem. Unbelievable level of humility. And if we can honor, sorry?
Statement as he knows himself. He's aware of this gift of humility.
That's right. And if we can say, look, I've been granted this gift, so it should be in the list. Not because I earned any of it. Because matter of fact, Hashem gave it to me. Had Hashem given it to someone else, maybe the other person would do better than me. Why Hashem chose me, I have no idea. But he did. It's beautiful. Never goes, sorry?
Yeah, it's
very nuanced.
Not weird to the people around him.
So I have, right.
So why
so I have to say,
the appearance of something that looks arrogant when in reality it's not.
It's a good question, and I think about that, and I think that's I rely back on what I was saying earlier, that the manner in which a person says it also expresses that. So I imagine that the way in which Rabbi Yosef would talk about his own humility itself would come across as humble.
Self-evident.
It was self-evident to the listener.
To the listeners.
Yeah, and we're going to see soon. We're going to see even more about this. That the very fact that he had the audacity to say I'm humble is itself the basic expression of his humility. Because if it was false humility, he would be backhanded about it, But because it's open and honest, the contrary, this is the reality. Hashem granted me the capacity for humility, and there's just where it is. Yeah, it's very subtle. Okay, so it continues, Rebbe. The Zeogam, this too is indeed Rav Yosef Anavshei v'Rav Tvuos b'Koyach Shar. The Gemara elsewhere tells us that Rav Yosef said about himself the following verse, which reads, "Much is the produce and the power of the ox." This is a verse that essentially says that if you handle a beast correctly, you can produce much more than if you were trying to do work on your own. Harness that power. So he says about himself that he harnessed the power, so to speak, and produced lots. In Torah learning, that is. In Torah learning specifically. So it says the Rebbe will apply the same standard here too. And it's actually clear in the analogy of the ox. As he says, just as it is that the lots of produce, einam boys with somkis makayach hashar, don't actually grow from the actual ox itself. The produce doesn't come out of the ox. It comes out of the capacity the earth has to produce. through the seed that's been planted in it, etc. Etc. I imagine that means rain, sunshine. There are also all kinds of other conditions that are required for the earth to produce. So what's the ox role? Bashar, the ox, is only a middleman. It's only a medium. Through his strength, there comes into reality the potential that the earth has to make things grow, and produces lots of produce. The ox only extracts potential. It does not have any innate capacity. It does not have any innate capacity for growth. It extracts the potential that exists in the earth, and the rain and the sunshine and whatever else is there. The earth is the one that contains that capacity, and the ox only extracts it. So Rav Yosef is saying, I have all the Torah. I'm only a medium to extract these qualities that Hashem has granted. That's all. I'm an ox. So actually, in calling himself an ox, it's on the surface, it seems like, a statement of his virtue. I'm an ox. I extracted so much Torah. But the Rebbe is digging deeper and saying it's a statement of humility. He's looking at everything you produce as a medium, not as anything inherent to him, but only someone who's like an ox extracting capacity that Hashem has granted. So his calling himself an ox that produces lots is actually a what's it called? An analogy for his humility. That he's only a medium that's able to extract the potentials Hashem has granted. Likewise, Rav Yosef al Atzmai, that which Rav Yosef said about himself, elsewhere in the Gemara, in the same place in the Gemara where he says that he has that he's like the ox. Quote, he has bundles of Mishnah, meaning he contains within them lots of information about Torah, lots of halacha. So again, we'll apply the similar standard. He's nothing but a medium, through which he's only a medium through which there's been extracted all the potentials that Hashem has granted him from above. Okay. It never goes even further, right? Because the premise was, as we said, that Rabbi Yosef, who says, don't list humility on the list of items that are gone because I'm humble, he's of the view that fear of sin is gone, which itself is puzzling. Rabbi Yosef didn't fear sin. Rav Nachman didn't fear sin. So why would he say fear of sin is gone? But yet humility is here that he has it.
He didn't actually say, right? It was inferred.
It's inferred from the way the Rebbe is learning it, given the fact that they don't comment on each other. They talk about themselves.
Concludes that as well.
Sorry?
The Rebbe concludes that as well.
Yeah, earlier. I took that from there, but I didn't think of that myself. But earlier in the talk, the Rebbe goes through that, yeah.
But that's puzzling, you're saying.
That's right. Does he really believe that there's no more fear of sin? Does he believe his friend Rav Nachman doesn't? Does he think he himself doesn't fear sin? What is it? So explains the Rebbe. Chadayin in a move on, the following is not yet understood. HaTorah Shalomda, right? So we understand now the humility element. That humility itself is a quality granted from above. The capacity to appreciate that everything I have is a gift. That itself is a gift, and that's how Rav Yosef viewed his own humility. Now, what about the fear of sin? HaTorah Shalomda, the Torah that a person learns, saves one from his evil inclination. That his evil inclination not make him stumble into sin. This is what the Gemara tells us. That a person learns Torah, it protects him from sin. Rav Yosef even spoke about it in our Gemara, and Sotah there were notes in the footnote. Now, by my Yosef, this virtue that Rav Yosef had, that he was afraid of sin, considering all the Torah he learned, he was a person that guarded himself from sin. They are not a gift granted from above. They require his learning. Right? The gifts from above allow him to reach the level of Sinai. Sinai is a level the Gemara refers to associated with Rabbi Yosef, that Rabbi Yosef was Sinai, and Sinai means that it's someone who's able to contain within him lots of Torah information, as opposed to Oiker Hardim, which is the other designation, which is someone who has the ability to dig deeply into the background and to extract other views. Right? There's two qualities. There's one, there's a person who's like the depth of knowledge, and one who has the breadth of knowledge. So Sinai is referred to as the breadth of knowledge, meaning he has all of Torah, like Sinai, versus the one who's Oiker Harim, the one who turns over mountains, that's the one who has the depth and able to extract. So Rabbi Yosef is designated as Sinai, as the one who is like breadth of knowledge, right? He said before that he has bundles of Mishnah. Right? So that gift from above, to be able to retain that information, that's a gift that led him to becoming Sinai. But those qualities don't make him be protected from sin. That he has to earn by actually learning. It's because of his own effort that he learned. Sinai, to the point that he became someone who's like Sinai, that retains tons of Torah. So he earned his fear of sin. Seemingly. If so, how could Rabbi Yosef be humble when he knows that through his own work, he elevated to the level of someone who's guarded from sin? In other words, like this.
Like, why would you reject that notion?
Well, maybe that's question one, which we'll get to, but the Rebbe is asking here a different question. How could he even be humble? He knows that he worked hard to learn Torah. Okay, so the Torah learning that he achieved, the Torah learning itself, okay, that's because he mined the gifts of Hashem, of the mind that Hashem gave him, and was able to learn. Okay, so the learning is the result of extracting the gift Hashem gave me. But the next step, which is thanks to my learning, I now no longer sin, that's a quality I earned, seemingly. So how could he be humble? If humility is based on the fact that he acknowledges that what he has is a gift, well, fear of sin isn't a gift. Fear of sin is something you earned.
Based on the learning of the Torah.
Based on his learning, based on his efforts. But the efforts that he put in to become someone who's no longer sinning. So seemingly that is his own work. So how could he be humble now? And I was asking like a question from the other way. Following?
Maybe because it's not a gift from God, the learning part. He's of the opinion that he hasn't reached that level.
Let's see. So he has to be honest. He knows he doesn't sin. Right? He has to be honest about the fact that he knows he doesn't sin.
Right.
That's the premise of this whole talk here. That humility is not dishonesty. So if he doesn't sin, he knows he doesn't sin, and he knows that he got there by working very hard. Okay.
Right. He has to be honest.
Exactly. Which he is, which is why he says, "I'm humble." But then, how could you be humble if you know you earned this unique quality of not being able to not sinning? Because you know you don't sin, right? And Rebbe goes even further. Listen to this line. We don't say that you have to be humble before all animals. We don't, the humility is, as we said earlier, the person says, if someone else was given my quality, they would do better. Are you supposed to say, hey, had an animal be given my quality, they would do better? I don't have to say that. Because an animal doesn't have the ability to extract any of those qualities, which means there is some effort on my part, which means some of the things I earned at the end of that effort is my effort. So how can he be humble? If humility is based on the fact that it's a gift, certain things aren't, because I have to extract. And specifically by extracting the learning from that quality Hashem gave me, I now no longer sin. That's a huge accomplishment. So how could he retain his humility? So let's see the Rebbe's answer here, and we'll pause with that. Sorry?
His way of deciphering the information is still a gift from God, his mind, his way he...
Right, but then again,
right?
An animal can't extract it, right?
No, but...
Which means that there has to be some effort on your part, which means something of the net result is your effort. So Rebbe is kind of separating between extracting the actual quality, which is learning, that's all a gift, but then the things that are a byproduct of that, that's because I actually extracted that effort. And now that I don't sin because of all learning, is because I extracted that capacity. So the capacity for learning that I extracted, that's a gift from Hashem. But then the things I get at as a result of that is because I actually did it.
The things you got at it, meaning...
The fact that I no longer sin now.
that you don't want.
That's right.
Sin.
That's something now I earned.
Right.
But let's see how the Rebbe puts it. The Rebbe's answer will be so beautiful. And then we're going to stop here. And then tomorrow, on Friday, we'll get to Rav Nachman's view. And we'll see how they just have different understandings. Okay, so let's see the Rebbe's answer. The Shleimar might suggest, as the Rebbe, top left, second paragraph. Mashilim with that Torah. That which Torah learning, Matzal Menachet, saves someone from sin. Das Rabbi Yosef, in Rabbi Yosef's view. Eina Kavana. The intention is not that Torah is learned at such a lofty level to the point that it completely transforms the person learning. Hainu, meaning to say, that he himself gets to such a level he's no longer capable of sinning. Ella, rather, the person himself, as far as his level goes, it's not guaranteed that he won't sin. Torah saves him. That is what protects him and saves him from sin. In other words, everything like this. There are two ways in which a person could be refrained from sin. One is because he has gotten to the point that he is the kind of person that would never sin. That's one level. That is true yiras chet. That's true fear of sin. Where the person himself has reached a level where the very notion of doing something against Hashem is repulsive to him. That's fear of sin.
That's by way of
work. By way of work. In Rav Yosef's view, Torah study, not just Torah study, but Torah study in such a fashion that it changes me, which includes lots of prayer, lots of meditation, not just raw learning. What will the raw learning do? It will protect me. It will protect me from sin. Protect me from sin in the sense that even though I might be the kind of person who might sin, but my Torah doesn't allow me. It's an external force. It didn't make me into someone who fears sin. It's an external force that prevents me from sinning. It's like the Kotzker Rebbe famously said. The famous Kotzker Rebbe said, I don't want my students, my chassidim, my followers, to refrain from sin because they're too pious. To me, he doesn't like that. I prefer my followers not to sin because they have no time. They have no time. They're busy learning, they're busy praying, they're busy helping others. They don't have time to sin. So does that mean, that's what Rabbi Yosef is saying here. That's what they were saying here. In Rabbi Yosef's view, the fact that Torah protected him from sin is not because he became a person who's afraid of sin, but because the Torah protects him. It's an external force. And therefore he cannot say of himself, I'm afraid of sin. I don't know. All I did was extract the quality Hashem gave me to learn. And that learning prevents me from sinning, not because I earned any quality. And therefore it's complete humility. The fact that he's able to learn, gift from Hashem. The fact that he's humble, gift from Hashem. Fear of sin, I don't have fear of sin. I just have Torah that protects me. And that Torah is a gift.
It's an external force, as you said.
It's an external force preventing me from sinning. This is further to humility.
So then you can make the claim that the fear of sin is gone.
That's correct. So he can say fear of sin is gone. Because the fact that I don't sin is not because I've truly become fearful of sin. It's a byproduct. Exactly. It's a byproduct of learning. Not because I transformed into a person who can no longer sin. In theory, if I didn't learn, maybe I could sin. But because I learned and I extracted this gift Hashem gave me, I technically don't sin. So it's further to his humility. The fact that he says fear of sin is no longer, itself plays into his humility. Because he looks at the fact that he doesn't sin and says, hey, it's not real fear of sin. And the fact that I have Torah learning, gift from Hashem. The fact that I have humility, also gift from Hashem. Ultimate humility. That's right. So the fact that he says fear of sin is no longer, is not because he looks down on his friends, but because of his humility in his own state of being. Considering that he looks at his own fact of never sinning as a byproduct of learning, not because he earned it. Not because he truly transformed in
sin, but it's not because of fear of sin.
Exactly.
It's just because of a byproduct of sin.
Yes. Well, perhaps he does have fear of sin, and by my standards, he probably does. But by the standards of his own humility, he's saying, look, I just learned by the gift that Hashem gave me.
Right.
And therefore I don't sin. But I can become someone who's fear of sin. It's not me. So and that's why he says fear of sin is gone. Rebbe truly transformed into a person who cannot sin. I didn't do that. So fear of sin is gone. Humility, it's a gift. Sorry?
That keeps his humility as well.
Correct. It plays into his humility. The fact that he removes fear of sin from the list is part of his humility. So it's the last paragraph. Therefore, to conclude this, and then tomorrow we'll get to Rav Nachman's view. Because Rav Nachman said that fear of sin is no longer gone. He actually said fear of sin is existing. But he says humility is gone. Why does he say humility is gone? Why doesn't he look at his friend Rav Yosef and say, hey, look, he's humble? We'll see that tomorrow. It's beautiful. Okay, let's conclude Rav Yosef's view. Therefore, Rav Yosef, just as Rav Yosef looked at the Torah he learned, just like the Torah Rav Yosef learned did not leave him taking credit, and he said, look, I'm just an ox that's extracting the produce. It's not me. Kaniska Lila has explained before. So too, he did not take any credit for the fact that he doesn't sin. He's being saved from the evil inclination. Because that too is not because he became someone who fears of sin, but because Torah.
Yeah, everything fits together.
Let's see, it all fits together. Okay, so the recording got caught up for 2 seconds, but essentially the Rebbe concludes that his Torah learning prevented him from sin, but he didn't think of himself as becoming a new person that's afraid of sin, thanks to his Torah. So that itself plays into his humility. As we explained, and God willing, tomorrow we'll see Rav Nachman's view, and why Rav Nachman says, I'm sorry, humility is gone, but fear of sin still is around. That we'll see tomorrow, God willing. I'm sorry, that's Rav Nachman's view, yes. We'll see on Thursday, I'm sorry, yes, not tomorrow. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden. No, not Thursday, on Friday, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, Yidden.